Horror is such a broad genre that it has been broken down by critics and moviegoers alike into countless subgenres. While most people might be familiar with subgenres such as slasher horror or found footage, within the past few years a new type of horror genre has begun to emerge dubbed eco-horror. Eco-horror is described by Impactor as novels, short stories, and anthologies based on environmental and often correspondingly social themes and plotlines. This definition can be even further simplified into humans mess with nature and suffer the consequences. In 2020 especially, climate fiction has begun to grow in popularity and has begun to increasingly find an audience in the horror genre. Eco-horror has a lot to say in a wide variety of ways that it expresses its messages. So let's dive in. We are living in an age of environmental horror. Climate change is running rampant, with many national powers giving little to no thought to the impact we have on our environment. Plastic waste is ever increasing, with sources stating that we could reach upwards of 600 million tons of plastic floating in the oceans by 2040. Air pollution, deforestation, and carbon emissions are all ever-present threats to the Earth, but many people aren't even aware of these massive issues. However, as the history of horror and its subgenres suggest, cultural anxiety rooted in the environment isn't exactly brand new. Eco-horror as a subgenre presents scenarios in which the environment itself strikes back at humanity, punishing our abuse of not only the world around us, but of its living, breathing, non-human avatars as well. By imagining on the screen our concerns and fears regarding our connection to the natural world, eco-horror can help us to work through our fears and determine what we can actually do about them, both at the political and personal level. Finding themselves in jeopardy, the characters in these films must learn to evolve with their surroundings, adapting to new rules in the face of the extraordinary. In eco-horror, to refuse or otherwise fail to acknowledge and adapt to change results in annihilation. Sometimes, even acknowledgement and adaptation fail to be enough, underscoring the apocalyptic tone of eco-horror and its predominantly fatalistic commentary on the future of the human race. Previous waves of eco-horror occurred in the 1950s and 1970s. Horror films of the 1950s often encapsulated post-World War II attitudes of uncertainty towards science in the wake of the development of the atomic bomb, while roughly 2 decades later, Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring is credited as the catalyst for the films and novels dealing with the environment. Carson's book was not a work of fiction, however, and was instead a sort of exposé that broke earth-shattering news about the use and effects of pesticides. This book actually helped lead to the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. Carson's book helped the public realize that humans were directly impacting nature in a harmful way, and authors and filmmakers took this idea and ran with it, which led to eco-horror's second wave, one in which nature lashed out in the form of bears, sharks, bees, ants, and other animal protectors. A third resurgence took place in the late 2000s, with films characterized by heightened worry and a notice surrounding global warming and the sustainability of natural resources. Films such as M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, where plants begin to release deadly toxins to fight back against humanity, and Larry Fessenden's 2006 movie The Last Winter, where oil drilling efforts in Alaska lead to the awakening of natural forces that fight to protect nature, exemplify this era. But what has eco-horror been up to in the past decade? Well, this is the topic that I want to address with this video by bringing to your attention a beautiful and haunting sci-fi horror experience. So let's talk about Annihilation. 2018's criminally underlooked sci-fi movie Annihilation was based on a novel of the same name, written by Jeff Vandermeer. Grossing roughly $43 million at box offices against a $50 million budget, it is by all means a box office bomb. However, in the months and years that have passed, the movie has begun to garner praise for its subtle and thoughtful commentary and symbolism regarding death, grief, and the self-destructive nature of humanity. The movie follows cellular biology professor Lena, played by Natalie Portman, as she recounts how she was recruited by the government to join 4 other women to enter a mysterious anomalous zone known as the Shimmer. The Shimmer is a quarantine zone of mutating plants and hybrid animals that was caused by a meteor strike roughly 3 years before the events of the movie. Characterized by beautiful plants and mutated animal hybrids, the Shimmer is something completely unknown and unexplainable. The team enters the Shimmer with the goal of reaching a lighthouse that sits on the southern shore, only to immediately lose all sense of direction and time. Weeks pass in what feels like the span of minutes, and none of the 5 women seem to have the same recollection of how far they've gone into the zone. After a brief but dangerous encounter with a mutated albino crocodile, the group stumbles across remnants of a past exploration team who went missing in the uncanny zone. As the team desperately tries to make sense out of what they're seeing and experiencing, they ultimately fail to come up with a concrete explanation. The 5 explorers are eventually picked off one by the Shimmer's deadly inhabitants, or in the case of physicist Josie Raddick, simply give themselves up to become one with the Shimmer. The climax of the movie occurs when Lena and the expedition leader Ventress reach the lighthouse. Within the stone tower, they encounter the meteor crater, and Ventress, overcome with the Shimmer's power, dissolves into a glowing, pulsating mass that shifts into a silvery humanoid figure, which begins to mirror Lena's every move. Trapped in the lighthouse with this alien entity, Lena hands it a phosphorus grenade before managing to escape from the lighthouse as the grenade goes off and the tower collapses, destroying the Shimmer along with it. The reason I wanted to focus on this movie specifically is that I believe it is representative of what could become the newest cycle of eco-horror. The best way to describe this next cycle of eco-horror can be found in Bethany Duane's essay titled Planetary Eco-Horror and Sublime Annihilation. She puts forward the idea of a subgenre that she dubs planetary eco-horror. Duane describes this as cases in which the inhuman encounter affects a non-human or human ecology at a cosmic scale, and makes the argument that most eco-horror films and novels rest on the basic idea that nature and humanity exist as separate ontological entities. However, she goes on to argue that with planetary eco-horror, the human and non-human entities are inseparably intertwined. This new era of cosmic and incomprehensible sci-fi horror allows for conversations about environmental ethics because it can weave them into its very form. By using horror as a medium to convey its message, Vandermeer avoids a sense of disingenuous optimism about what needs to be done in order to accept environmental reform. Annihilation doesn't try and argue major ethical questions. Instead, it chooses to present topics such as the value of biodiversity as plain facts rather than arguments needing to be made. It instead focuses on the unknowable and acknowledges the anxiety that humans can feel about adopting environmental ethics and the uncertainty that encompasses humanity's relationship with nature. As Duane highlights in her essay, there are major differences between typical eco-horror, wherein nature fights back against the threat of humans, and planetary eco-horror, where humans are perpetually alienated from their natural surroundings. But by taking humans out of their natural environment, it allows authors and filmmakers to explore a wide range of different opportunities. And with more existential horror movies such as Color Out of Space and Underwater, touching on Lovecraft-esque cosmic beings, I believe that the film industry sees the possibilities that planetary eco-horror holds as well. I believe that Duane summarizes this entire idea the best when she states that planetary eco-horror allows us to ask the question, not what is the right choice, but instead, what if there is no such thing as either right or choice?